Welcome, everybody, to Dead Talk Live. And today it is my honor to welcome a screen legend, Hiro Kanagawa, with us. Hiro, thank you for being here. How are you doing?
Oh, my pleasure entirely. Thanks for having me.
It is our pleasure to have you here with us. And like we chatted before we went live, with a resume as vast as yours, we're just going to try to cover some of the highlights of
All
what you've
right.
done. Let's talk about a film that you have coming up for release, date still unknown, and that's Orphan First Kill. It's a
Hmm.
highly anticipated film where you play a character named Donnan. From what you can tell us, what is your character about in the film?
He's a detective, and from the first film, Orphan, uh, the the child played by Isabel Fuhrman.
Yeah.
This is a prequel, so it's before the events of that first film. But my character is a detective who is a little suspicious of her, and is obviously investigating what's actually going on. We shot that film in Winnipeg, Canada, at the basically at the height of the pandemic, the
Wow.
first wave of the pandemic. So it was um, it was definitely an unusual experience in that regard. It was my first, shoot going away somewhere during the pandemic, and in those days, obviously, we didn't really know what we were dealing with. So there was a lot of care taken with the COVID protocols and so on. And somehow we did manage to get that done. And I think fans of the original film are going to be really excited and interested to see that Isabel Fuhrman is reprising the same role some 13 or 14 years later. And of course, when she made the original film, she was actually still a child. And now she's obviously a grown woman, so and playing the same role. So
That
there's,
amazes me.
yeah, it is amazing. And from what I understand, there's no CGI trickery involved. It's all organic movie magic.
Wow. That when I first heard that, with the first movie and her age and now doing the second one, that just amazed me. Now the movie is directed by a former guest of ours, William Brent Bell.
Right.
Great guy. What was your experience working with Brent?
Oh, you would never know that he's directed horror films, you know, because he's just the gentlest, sweetest guy. And I guess that's kind of been my experience in a lot of my career, what people are known for and how they are as human beings.
Yeah.
Meet them one on one. There's very often a large discrepancy, especially when you're talking about the horror genre,
Yeah.
or let's say the action genre, where someone is, let's say, has a career as a tough guy or whatever, but when you meet them, they wind up being just the sweetest, gentlest people, and it's hard to imagine where those images of pain and terror
Come
where are
from.
they coming from?
I
Because
remember. I remember when I first chatted with Brent. I say, "Hey, William." He's like, "First off, call me Brent." So right there and then, I knew. I mean, he was just the sweetest guy. So we're very excited to watch Orphan First Kill. Hopefully, we'll get a release date soon. Now, let's
yeah,
talk about the science fiction genre, which is your most recent on-screen appearance, and we're talking, of course, about Star Trek Discovery. You play Dr. Harai, who is, let me get this accurate, an astrolinguist and
hmm
xenophonology and theoretical semiotics. That's quite a mouthful there. Now, when you go into a science fiction role, is there any kind of different preparation that you do as opposed to Orphan, which is a horror film?
I don't think so. Very often nowadays, because of the secrecy with scripts and so on, um, it's hard to even know what you're going to be doing. Uh, Obviously, if you're a series regular and so on, you might have more information.
Yeah.
But with the case of Dr. Hirai, I'm kind of like uh, I'm kind of like in NFL terms, I'm kind of like a player they picked up at the trade deadline, who's going to
Yeah.
join the team for the last 6 games of the season or whatever. So I came in when nowadays a lot of shows, when you audition, you don't even actually audition with the scene from the actual show, from
Yeah,
the
you
actual
get
script
sides.
because of the secrecy, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't actually know much about the character until I finally got the first script. So in that sense, there's not a whole lot of time to prepare in advance, but there are always, going to be advisors on set, and that's true of obviously if you're playing law enforcement or a medical situation, there are going to be medical advisors, there are going to be law enforcement advisors, military advisors, as the case may be, and even with science fiction, I know that for this storyline where we, for the first time, communicate with the 10C of
Hmm.
species from beyond the galactic barrier, which is in no ways anthropomorphic. Um, I know from speaking with the director and Michelle Paradise and the writer of that particular episode that there was quite a bit of research with people who actually study this kind of thing.
Yeah.
What would communication with an alien life form be like? How
Hmm.
would that, what would the first steps be, and so on? And obviously there are people who have studied it, and so it was actually quite fascinating to hear about all of the research that went into that.
Wow, I didn't know they delved that deeply into it. Now, what drew you to the role? Was it the character? Were you a Star Trek fan and just were dying to be a part of this franchise?
Mm-hmm. Well, anyone my age, we grew up in our childhood. You come home from school, there were three channels,
Yeah.
and one was Gilligan's Island, and then maybe the Mike Douglas show or the Merv Griffin show, and then invariably Star Trek would be on, the original Star Trek.
Yeah.
So anyone my age is a huge fan and has seen all of those original episodes a number of times, and I had actually read for Discovery a couple of times previously for other roles. And I think one time at least they were pretty close to casting me, but the scheduling didn't work out and so
Hmm.
on. So I was really thrilled when it finally did work out. And then, to finally learn what my character would be and to learn what the situation was, that to me was just icing on the cake.
Yeah.
The fact that my character would, have a substantial role in this very pivotal
Hmm.
episode where, for one of the first times in the franchise's entire history, humanity communicates with a species from beyond the galactic barrier.
Exactly. I completely
So,
agree with you. Now, Dr. Harai is very calm, has a very calm but cold demeanor. Being watching the original Star Trek, seeing Star Treks over the years, was that strictly written into the script as to how your demeanor was going to be? Did you have some input into it as to how you wanted to bring him to life?
well, obviously, creating characters, it's always a discussion. It's always a collaboration. There's what's scripted, and then when you get on set on the day and you're interacting with the director and the other characters, a lot of organic things happen. But yes, as scripted, Dr. Hirai was a socially awkward individual. I think President Rilak actually does talk about his poor bedside manner, as
Yeah.
they say.
Mm-hmm.
So that definitely is in the script. And but in playing him over the course of the 4 episodes, I was very definitely able to find, I think, his humanity in the ways in which he's not just an a-hole, right?
Exactly.
So
Exactly. I totally agree. Now, Discovery is covering a lot of social issues that are relevant, not in the 32nd century, but right now in the 21st century. Do you think that's an important topic for not only discovery but for entertainment to keep covering?
Absolutely. And as you know, as someone of Asian heritage, it's been very heartening and encouraging for me in the last, let's say, 4 or 5 years to see so much more awareness
Mm-hmm.
around the topic and to see opportunities expanding for actors of diverse backgrounds. And but in terms of Star Trek, I mean, let's face it, it's always been ahead of the curve,
Yeah.
right? It's always, even going back to the original Star Trek, I mean, they had a very diverse cast. They had the first interracial relationship
Mm-hmm.
on television, and so on and so forth. So, Discovery also, it's a matriarchal universe. There are characters of, all uh, ethnicities and genders, and I think that's something that should be celebrated. It reflects the actual world that we live in,
Yes.
and it, certainly I know just from fans reaching out to me on social media and so on, that it's very important for, especially for young kids watching, right, to see themselves reflected, to recognize themselves in the faces that they see on screen.
And
So
yeah, and be
uh,
represented. Absolutely.
I'm really, that's another, thing about the show that I'm so thrilled to be a part of.
Is that what you attribute Star Trek's success, starting from the 60s? Like you said, it's always been ahead of the curve and it's still going strong today. Is that what you would attribute its success on?
I think that, I think Star Trek to me differs from other science fiction franchises in that it's not necessarily action oriented, right?
Mm-hmm.
It really is more about the idea side of science fiction.
Yeah.
It really is more about, kind of philosophical ideas of what would space exploration actually be like, and how would humanity conduct itself uh, in space.
Yeah.
And clearly, a lot of the political and social issues that we face here on Earth, uh, they would still be a part of
Mm-hmm.
us because we're human.
Yeah.
And I think, what Star Trek fans appreciate is that realism,
Yeah.
the psychological realism, as opposed to, the laser beams and the explosions, and, not to disparage those shows that have that,
Mm-hmm.
but Star Trek, I think, occupies a different niche, and that's what fans appreciate.
For me, the question whenever I watch Star Trek is like, what if that situation was really going on? That's I think at the core that is the question that a lot of fans ask, and I think that's a big part of its success. Now, moving on from Star Trek, you have done quite a bit of voiceover work in your career, like Mr. Fantastic and the Fantastic Four. Do you enjoy doing voiceover work? And what would you say is the biggest difference, voiceover from being in front of the camera?
I do enjoy it, and I'm doing a couple of shows right now. The biggest difference, I will tell you, for me, is the energy expenditure. I don't know if it's because maybe my normal manner of speaking is a little bit more laid back, or what. There's probably voice actors for whom it's just a walk in the park. But even when the show, let's say like Fantastic Four, the character of Reed Richards,
Mm-hmm.
even when it's fairly naturalistic, to me, it's still a great deal of energy expenditure, because obviously the voice is the only thing you have
Yeah.
with which to convey emotion, or with which to convey any kind of urgency, or whatever the scene calls for. And for me, that's a much greater energy expenditure than live action, acting in front of a camera,
Wow.
especially because film and television acting today in North America tends to be understated, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of a less is more situation in film and television. Theater, of course, you have to play the size of the room,
Hmm.
um, and then voice is perhaps not as big as being on stage in 1,000-seat house,
That's
but
true. Yeah.
it's still a fairly large energy expenditure for me, and actually I enjoy that.
That's awesome. I would definitely have thought actually being in front of the camera where you got to use body movements, voice, and everything would be a lot more taxing. But it's very interesting to hear that it's the voice and the amount of energy that goes into it is actually more taxing than just being in front of the camera. That's very fascinating. Now, I want to talk about one of my favorite characters of yours, and that is the one of a brain eating zombie lieutenant in iZombie. I love that show. That show has a cult following. First off, when you got the role, did it surprise you that it lasted as many seasons as it did?
Not at all. I mean, it was such. I don't want to. I mean, the word charming comes to mind, which is a
Yeah.
strange word to associate with zombies. But nevertheless, I thought it was such a fresh take on the zombie genre. I mean, to combine zombieism
Hmm.
with the humor that show had and the humanity that show had. I thought was a great combination. I wasn't surprised at all to see it go as long as I did, and I was very, disappointed that my character, unfortunately, had to self-immolate at the end of season 1. And
Yeah.
he did
Yeah.
make a brief cameo in a flashback a couple years later, but
I liked it because, I mean, we have seen throughout movies and TV shows zombies try to be portrayed differently in many different ways. And there have been movies that have come close to what iZombie did. But the way iZombie pulled it off, and it just worked so well. What was the atmosphere on the screen working? I mean, on the set working with everybody? Did you guys all have like a lot of fun working with each other?
oh yeah, I mean, from what I remember, it just being no tension whatsoever, and it just a whole lot of fun, and yeah, I my memory of it is a great deal of fun every time I was there for sure.
Now you have gotten to work on Marvel stuff, DC with Smallville. You were on Supernatural. You were on countless hit television shows. Is there any project, whether it be film or television, that to this day it holds a special place in your heart?
I think in recent memory, Altered Carbon
Mm-hmm.
stands out for me. Once again, I thought that in the science fiction genre, I thought that was so well done, and I remember just uh, feeling a tremendous level of excitement when we did that. Is because people forget it was one of the first Netflix shows that Netflix actually produced
Originals, yeah.
on its own.
Yeah.
Up until then, Netflix was, it was just buying content
Buying,
from
yeah.
that had already been made. So there was that aspect of it, and then just the production values were just so immense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that it was more like shooting a feature film,
Yeah.
right? That happened to be 10 or 12 hours long, uh, and everything about that was exciting for those reasons. And then just the cast that was assembled as well. It was everything about that experience. Still I still have very fond memories about that.
Well, let me ask you about that. Here you are, you're cast, you're doing a show that is produced by Netflix. They're still new to this. Um, in your mind, back then, Netflix is back, when they were starting to make their own original stuff. they were trying to get the ball rolling. Did you see it as a step down from doing regular television or film
No.
work, or were you like, all right, Netflix is producing original content. Let's see where this goes?
Yeah, yeah, no, because I had already had a couple of years previously an experience working on Man in the High Castle,
Yes.
which was
That's an Amazon
which
show.
was one of Amazon's
Yeah.
first. And I had back then I had the experience of, going to auditions and fellow actors going, oh, what are you working on? No, I'm working on this show for Amazon.
Yeah.
And they would look at me like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
Amazon is making shows?
Yeah.
But then, and of course, when I was first cast on Man in the High Castle, I had no idea what to expect. But the very first day walking into the studio for my wardrobe fitting and seeing the production design and the attention to, and just seeing the incredible world, right?
Yeah.
That they were putting together, it just blew my mind. And I was like, well, I'm on board. I have no qualms about, the fact that Amazon is producing this.
Yeah.
That's meaningless.
Yeah. Budget wise, it rivals. Yeah, sorry to cut you off, but budget wise, it rivals any big studio film at that point, or network television or any of that. And now we know where that has led to, where we are today. All the major players on the streaming market are producing their own content. Now, your first credit is like in '79. How
Yeah,
hard?
that's got to be a mistake.
Well, that's what IMDb says. It says
I know, but I don't know. I don't know why. I may have even tried to get that removed or corrected at one point, but
was it
I don't know
earlier
why
than '79 or later?
I was in high school in '79.
Oh, okay.
Right
But okay, so let's go even to the '80s and breaking into television and film, and compare it to the people that you see today, young folks or not so young folks coming into entertainment. I assume it must have been a lot harder back then than it is now, even though it's still very difficult now.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially for people of diverse backgrounds, I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say there's more opportunity.
Yeah.
Break in now than there was when I was starting out. I would have to say that must be true.
Yeah, I agree.
Especially for larger roles, characters that are well-rounded and have some substance to them. For many years, I was playing, Doctor Number 3 or Detective Smith or kind of Captain Exposition and Dr. Exposition who delivers the bad news or delivers, this what's the crisis in the surgery room or so on.
Yeah.
And so I don't have any bitterness about it. I cut my teeth doing that, and I've managed to have a long and productive career.
You've had a great career, and it's still going. We're looking forward to so much more from you. Hiro, I want to thank you so much for coming on here and sharing just a fraction of the experiences you've had over the years in regards to your work. It's been fascinating to hear. Do you have any final thoughts you want to share before we go?
Well, no, I'm really I really appreciate the opportunity to reach your audience, and hopefully next time we can talk more.
Orphan.
Or Orphan. I mean, we actually have had a ghost on my family farm back in Japan, so that's a story.
That's a story in itself.
Yeah,
I'd love to talk about that. I want to thank everybody who tuned in live and those of you who are going to watch this later on. Again, thank you to our guest, Hiro Kanagawa, who took time out of his afternoon to spend with us. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe. And on behalf of Hiro and myself, stay safe, stay walking. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.